Reports as well as it relates to police officers being stationed inside of polling stations. From us at GCOM, police officers are stationed outside of polling places unless their assistance is specifically requested by the presiding officer. This is consistent with electoral law and established protocol. Again, where these concerns were brought to us, they were immediately addressed. The big issue also that confronted us today was the concern of names of deceased persons seen on the list. Specifically, I point out here Fowles and Moore. Names can only be removed from an official with an official death certificate submitted to the General Register's office. Without it, names may remain until the next list revision cycle. This is a legal safeguard to prevent wrongful removal. We have discussed this matter as it relates to the removal of deceased persons from the list, the process that GCOM, the legal process that GCOM engages in relation to how that is done, where we receive death returns from the General Register's office, and these flagging are done in accordance with the legal provision or during the claims and objections period where persons are permitted to make those objections. Of course, as you know, and we have published the multiple safeguards in place at polling stations to guard against any possible impersonation. There were some concerns as it relates to slow voting process at some stations. The feedback we've received from polling stations across the country was that the process was progressing smoothly and in accordance with GCOM's procedures. I want to particularly note that while minor delays may have occurred during peak periods, but all systems remain effectively functioning. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now at the point where I presume, if not all, most of our polling stations are probably closed and at the count. I'm saying probably because there is while the poll closes or should close at 6 p.m., that if there are electors in the line, it is the responsibility of the presiding officer to count the number of persons in the line, ask the police officer at that particular station to stand behind the last person and ensure that all those persons are attended to in accordance with that provision. I'm sure currently in the respective areas, statements of poll, where possible, where counts have been concluded, are probably en route to the respective deputy supernumerary returning officers or to the returning officers of the respective district. If you check on GCOM's website, that statements of poll gallery is already live And so as those statements are delivered, you, as well as the members of the public, can access that gallery from very comfort of their home and examine those. Of poll. In relation to your first question, I'm fully aware of the issue of the up and down period of the website, particularly the query tool for the Finding Your Polling Station app. while we've experienced those issues, I think that our IT team was working on that round the clock to ensure that they put the necessary fixes in place and ensure that the system was live, up and running within the shortest possible time. We have continuously, throughout the day, and even now that we have launched that SOP gallery portal on our website, continue to ensure that we reassess and continue to monitor that website closely to avoid any possible such occurrence during the course of the night. First question, I'm fully aware of the issue that round the clock.
Reports of outages in various regions. Could you say how many polling stations have been affected by power outage and what are the implications for such?
Necessary fixes.
Marcel asked about disability because I don't have that. But we also received reports today about missing ballots, ballots being wrong, ballots being sent to polling station. I think Montrose was among communities listed.
Could you say how many polling stations have been affected by power outage and what are the implications for such?
All right, thank you very much for those questions, Svetlana. As it relates to the power outage situation, up to the time when I commenced this press briefing, I had not
Thank you very much for those questions, Svetlana.
However, what I can say
as it
is
relates to
that we
the
have
power outage
backup
situation,
systems in place to address that. In addition to that, for the purpose of the count, we have provided all polling stations with solar lamps to facilitate that process. But in the cases where that upload and scanning process of those SOPs continue uninterrupted. I think your second question had to do with a mix-up of ballots at Montrose. I am not aware of the issue, but for me, once the ballot has not been issued,
I'm fully aware of the issue. We have put
at the respective
backup systems in.
Then I believe that it will not have any implication on the process. Right. I don't think it would ideally affect the polling station in relation to a shortage of ballots. There are provisions in place to address any such occurrence, but we've not received any such report. So as at this point, I believe that it's safe to say that voting proceeded very well at that location you're referring to, even though we've not received that kind of report.
Can you shed some light on the supply primary school incident? Did you get any report from the chief of staff?
To a shortage of ballots.
So we've not
There are
received
provisions in place to address any such occurrence, but we've not received any such report. So as at this point, I believe that it's safe to say that voting proceeded very well at that location you're referring to, even though we've not received that kind of report.
Abina Rockcliffe, Guyana Standard. Can you shed some light on the Sophia Primary School incident?
So, a report. I have seen the circulation of a video on social media in relation to an incident at the Sophia Primary School. It is a matter that I will not want to address at this point in time without having all the facts in place. I'm sure at one of our follow-up press conferences when we have further details on that matter, we will be able to adequately address
You
it.
referred to an incident. There appear to be several incidents at that polling place. The one you're referring to that is circulating, and another late this afternoon, about half an hour before the close of polls, when there was an between the same.
Surely offer any comment on such a matter without having all the details on that. At the follow-up press conference, I'm sure we'll have some more details for you in relation to that.
Dennis Shabral, Demara Waves. I know you may not be able to give us a figure, but can you say, based on what you've been hearing from your colleagues, what has been the voter turnout like in terms of whether it was steady, slow, or any other description you feel is appropriate? And secondly, can you say why no proper testing was done of the query tool to avoid a crash of the website? This probably could have been avoided, some experts say, with the relevant testing and the purchasing of the necessary capacity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shabral. I like to deal with numbers. And so to prematurely tell you about turnout will be really a hit and miss. Our observation, what might work for you may not work for us, but from a GCOM standpoint, as the electoral management body, I prefer for us to look at numbers before we make such a pronouncement on turnout. As it relates to the query tool, I see present with us in the room this evening, we have the Information Technology Advisor from the UNDP, who has been offering support to GCOM in relation to its IT needs. And we've done a considerable amount of on the portal, and if that's why we've been urging persons way in advance to ensure that they use that tool to check their polling station. Again, it is unfortunate, but I think the work that was done by our technical team to ensure throughout the day that that did not remain for a long period is commendable, and that they've been able to quickly resolve those matters.
Ms. Ward, Julia Johnson, Prime News. I'm going to take you back to the inability of some people who are different promptly. And I'm saying this because I was at a polling station where I saw this firsthand. You spoke about the presiding officer being the person who would have been able to handle such things promptly. It did not happen, at least at the two incidents where it seemed as though people were looking for higher authority to allow these differently abled people to vote. That's one. Would you that? What is the process employed there? And at my polling station, in fact, the gate to the outer building at 6:30, two of the polling booths were ready and on time or day. You did have people waiting there, but on the back, which I knew was in place for late opening when poll stations open late, there is a time back that is given to the voters. I know you're going to tell me about people being in the line at the close of poll, but I saw at least 2 people going into that specific polling station and being told that they closed at 5:55.
Thank you so much for bringing that to our attention, Ms. Johnson. Let me address the first issue, again, as it relates to dealing with persons with disabilities. GCOM has continuously been engaging I think it's the National Commission on Persons with Disabilities. And of course, we continue to receive recommendations in that regard. One of the issues that we face in that regard. One of the issues that we face the
presiding officer then sought the guidance of the
fact that
respective DROs, and they were able to properly execute that task. That would be my hope that has happened. As it relates to the late opening of the polling station,
that we face there, Julia,
I am happy to report
is the
that
fact that
maybe that was maybe a very small percentage where that may have happened. Again, I am not sure what might have been the issue that contributed to the late opening of poll. But in relation to the matter that the poll closed at 6:01, that is of concern to us, and I hope that you may be able to help us with that information in relation to that polling station. And this is something that we may have to look at, because legally the poll closes at 6, and every minute counts in relation to that.
Ms. Ward, have there been any major challenges with persons utilizing the folio passport or the folio?
one of the issues that we face the fact that
in the amendment of the Representation of the People Act that caters now for persons to vote with a valid passport and a valid driver's license. Even outside of any form of identification, a voter, once they're listed on that official list of electors, they can vote without an ID card, without any form of identification, because there is a system in place to identify that voter. And as you rightly mentioned, the provision of the folio, to do that, it is what is the procedure, and I have not received any complaints and should not have any complaints in any voter being able to cast their ballot because they didn't have a form of identification. Of course, an oath of identity.
one of the issues that we face the fact that
person before they're allowed to proceed to cast their ballot. I see a question over here.
Hi, good night. Fiona Marston, I'm from the I've seen on Facebook tonight some activists posting what appears to be copies of statements in total and coming to their own conclusion. What is your appeal to the general public and politicians in terms of their awaiting credible and conclusion results?
Right. We have issued several appeals in relation to this matter. And again, for us at GCOM, I want to remind persons that GCOM is the only authority to release the election results. If you've noticed, we've even stayed away
from preliminary results. And so I want to urge persons, and as you've mentioned, political parties, to desist from doing that. We want to ask persons in particular to rely on the tool that is legally provided for by way of HICCUPS website to ensure that they follow from that tool and so that they're not misguided by what is published out there. So it is important for persons, particularly the electorate as a whole, to be only guided by what HICCUPS publishes in relation to any kind of results from these elections.
Hi, good night. Tamika Garnett from the Guyana Times. My first question is pertaining to a picture that was circulating of national cyclist or former national cyclist Elijah Grace posting a picture of his ballot. Would you be, I don't know if that's authentic, so you can confirm whether or not that was actually authentic. And would you say that HICCUPS did enough to prevent voters from taking their cell phones into the polling station, especially in light of the fact that we saw defiant voters during the discipline services voting, going in with their phones and taking pictures of their ballots? My next question is, we've seen a lot of reports circulating online of persons saying they went to vote, didn't have an ID card or turned away, or they had conflicts with the presiding officers. At least one person was saying that they went to vote but was told that their name was ticked already. I don't know how authentic or not authentic some of these things are, because of course fake news is common. But can you say, what is the reporting mechanism or feedback mechanism that HICCUPS has available to citizens who would have encountered some issues at their polling station? What is the process for them to report to HICCUPS what happened with them at their polling station, and what is the next step going forward after that? If I say something happened that prevented me, a valid citizen, from voting, how can I report this to HICCUPS, and what is the next step for me?
Thank you, Tamika. As it relates to your first question, again, HICCUPS does not have the requisite, or has not been mandated with investigative capacity. And therefore, as it relates to the ballot circulating on Facebook, while it is alleged that it belonged to a certain person, HICCUPS does not know that. And therefore, anything as it relates to investigating the origin of that photograph lies in the hands of the police. You've also followed on with that question as it relates to whether HICCUPS has done enough to put the mechanism into motion as it relates to not allowing persons to enter the polling station with their phones on, off, whatever. I'm sure that as you traverse today, you would have noticed signs at the respective polling stations. And even prior to that, several notices by way of social media or in the newspapers, and even via your coverage as it relates to this matter. I have seen the placement of desks next to voting compartments for persons to leave their phones there. But we've seen, of course, the one issue. What I am happy about is that that issue has not been a widespread issue. And therefore, I believe that the message was clear, and persons have really taken the opportunity to follow those procedures that we've placed in them. As it relates to the other question, as it relates to a feedback mechanism, you rightly started off that question as it relates to misinformation and disinformation. And so I will leave it right there, particularly note that we have to be very careful when we receive these reports, and therefore I'm sure that as citizens, if they have such concerns, then of course GCOM is always willing to listen and hear what those concerns were. But again, we have to be very careful with the level of misinformation and disinformation that are peddled in the public domain. Are there other questions?
Swetland Marshall, news source again. Sorry, I'm tired. But yes, following up on Tamika's question. Would GCOM be requesting formally for the police to launch an investigation into these illegal acts of having those ballots photographed? Or you're going to leave it open for them to make the first jump at the investigation? My second question has to do with the chairman of the Elections Commission. We noticed her statement last night. I don't know if anyone in the room saw her for the day, but could you brief us on her visits, where she was able to visit, her engagement with electors and things like that? I haven't seen her. I don't know about the other reporters, but I haven't seen her. And would she be engaging journalists at this crucial point?
Okay. Can you repeat the first question for me, Sakata?
With regards to the ballots and having those photographs illegally by voters, would she come form the writing to the police requesting that the investigation launch into the acts to have persons prosecuted, or it would be up to the police to launch an investigation?
All right, I can properly respond to the course of action at the next press briefing, because of course I will not want to, I do not know the direction in which the Commission will handle this particular matter, and so until I'm guided by what the next steps are in relation to that, only then I'll be able to say whether GCOM will formally write to the police or whether the police will take the necessary actions on their own.
And the chairman?
So I'm sure that at some point that the chairman will engage the media. Of course, you know that for the purpose of the declaration, that is a mandate that falls under the commission. I've been engaged for the entire day. Of course, distributed ballots for intermixing, that's the discipline forces ballots, and therefore I do not have a record as to where the chairman may have visited. I'm sure that she was out and about somewhere, but I'm sure that sometime throughout this period you may be able to have an engagement.
I'm just following up with a question on the chairman. Substantive question. Could you say where the chairman was today?
I'm unable to provide that information.
But you know that she was somewhere.
Right.
Okay. My substantive question is, as we come to the end of this press conference here, one, is this the final press conference for today? And as it relates to final results, is it still the 4th as projected?
Okay. I think more than likely this, well, I should say this is likely to be our final press conference for this evening. As you know, we will have operations continuously ongoing, and therefore we would want to be engaged in those operations. But as I mentioned, the statement of poll gallery is live on our website, and therefore you can follow that gallery online during the course of the evening. But of course, if anything urgent arises, therefore, and we need to address that, it's more than likely that we can have one of this. I do not anticipate anything of that magnitude happening that will require us meeting in this space. But of course, this media center is open on a 24-hour basis, and therefore you're all welcome to stay, and you're all welcome to follow our website in relation to those SOPs. So more than likely, our next press conference will be scheduled for sometime tomorrow.
Ms. Ward Travis Chase, you said you were involved in the intermixing of the discipline services balloting today?
Well, the dispatch of.
You're the dispatcher. You were also the logistical officer at GCAM?
No, Mr. Chase.
So isn't that the work of the logistical officer? Explain to me how that works, please.
Mr. Chase, these ballots are dispatched across the country, and therefore it requires the support of all in our operations to ensure that it is done in a timely and efficient manner, of course in the presence of political party agents and under police escort, to ensure that we cover all the gazetted polling stations where those ballots were expected to be intermixed.
So here I come again. First, it's saying discipline services ballots today, that's one. Two, spoke to the young lady on the other side of the room about the statements of the poll being available on social media, but there's nothing that GCOM can do because those are posted, and if people read them and post them, it's an illegal act. As I am aware, would you say whether or not that has changed?
Come again.
And of course, legal act. As I am aware, would you say whether or not that has changed? And of course, so I'm asking you again.
Julia, you're really trying to pin me down on that.
And you did not definitively answer that a short while ago, Marcel. So I'm asking you again, thanks.
Julia, you're really trying to pin me down on that. And I don't want to be very malicious at this point in a very sensitive environment to say that the law permits us 15 days. But of course, as always, we understand the anxiety, and we have committed to delivering those results within the shortest possible time. And of course, taking into account all the legal provisions that are in place. When I say legal provisions, as it relates to the requests for recounts, if there are requests for recounts and we have to facilitate those recounts, then it means it may shift those anticipated timeline. But of course, we want to ensure that this process concludes within the shortest time possible. Julia, as it relates to your question as it relates to the statement of poll, I know when the young lady asks a question, she was particularly referring to a particular statement of poll. And I've just received a statement from the Chief Election Officer in relation to that particular statement of poll. And so, while it will be shared with this statement, will be shared with you after this press conference, I will take the liberty of reading this statement. It says, GCOM rejects the publication of fake statement of poll. The Guyana Elections Commission has noted the publication of a fake statement of poll at 1 minute past the scheduled close of poll. GCOM wishes to make it abundantly clear that it is impossible for the counting of the ballots at any polling station to have commenced. This despicable act can only be seen as creating a platform on which the political party associated with Team Mohammed Facebook page can create the impression that it has been successful at the polls. GCOM takes the opportunity once again to appeal to all stakeholders to accept only the results of the elections that are posted on GCOM's website in the form of statements of poll. 2, the official declarations made by the supernumerary returning officers and returning officers for the district and sub-districts respectively, and the national results to be declared by GCOM. The publication of fake results will be put to the Guyana Police Force for investigation. I will share this statement with you after this briefing ends.
Thank you, but you didn't answer the question on the discipline services ballots.
Sure. Thanks to the reminder, Julia. Again, I am not sure at the time of this press briefing what is happening operationally. Those ballots will either be detected during the process of the count, and so there is a system in place already to ensure that as soon as it is detected, that it arrives in the respective region to ensure that it is counted in that particular district. So that process, I'm sure, as it unfolds during the count, that we will be able to identify those ballots.
Ms. Ward, can you say what is the procedure from the time of the creation of the statements of poll to uploading? What could you run us through the process for GCOM, that is?
Right. So then it's the deputy returning officers. They're responsible for clusters of polling stations. And so once they've picked up those respective packages from the respective polling stations, it is then transported to the office of the supernumerary returning officer for the respective sub-district or the returning officer for the respective district where those districts just have returning officers. Thereafter, the process will commence for the uploading of all those SOPs to the GCOM website. And once all the SOPs have been uploaded, it is only at that point the tabulation process will commence.
Do you know when the first SOPs will be uploaded based on what you've just said? You have a time frame?
I'm unable to tell you that. That is an operation that is ongoing in the field, and I will not have that information here at this point.
But what about for the least populated areas? Wouldn't it be easier for these to be done in a timely manner rather than compared to the densely populated areas of the country?
Right. So it may not always be about the population, but it has to also do with the terrain. And so while the population in a particular area may be very small, we also have to consider the terrain. And so again, those are other factors that we should also consider. What I can say to you then is our staff will be working around the clock. There's no stop. And therefore, sometime throughout tonight, I'm sure you can expect SOPs being uploaded to that portal.
You had a question, Mr. Chase?
No, no.
Oh.
With regards to the missing, the ballots that have not been accounted for, if those ballots are discovered tonight, hopefully they are, would the DCO be in a position to transport them to the respective regions
It
tonight?
must be done.
Or?
It must be done.
Okay, to me.
Pertaining to my earlier question about the mechanism for feedback, if a person, a citizen has a grievance or a question or a concern about what happened to them, I don't think I clearly understand how the voter is supposed to contact GCOM. Is there a hotline? Is there a section on the website? Where do I go as a voter who was aggrieved in my voting process? Where do I go at GCOM to lodge my report?
So we have the various layers, the supernumerary returning officers, the returning officers, chief election officer. So either of those persons can ensure that they reach out to. Again, Tamika, when you asked that question, it was with that note of misinformation, and I would hope that that was indeed the case, and those persons were able to cast their ballots today.
My final question has to do, I noticed, I figured that the DCO is listening to this press conference if he's the person who responded to the fake SOP. Now, why was it that he quickly responded to that and said that GCOM would request that a police investigation be launched into those fake SOPs? And we haven't seen the same level of commitment coming from GCOM with regards to investigating those persons who allegedly photographed their ballots. When this is something that happened first, when the members of the disciplined forces went to vote, and happened again today. Why not that same level of commitment to having these issues investigated?
Thank you for your final question, Svetlana. And again, it's not the DCO, that was a statement from GCOM. And so you place him in a difficult spot. First of all, I would like to take the opportunity as GCOM's Public Relations Officer to thank you for your cooperation and support in the fields today. You've been wonderful in your coverage, and I look forward to the same kind of support as we continue to cover these elections to the point of a declaration. It would also be very remiss of me to conclude this press briefing this evening not to, on behalf of the Commission, the CEO, and our entire operations team, to congratulate the people of Guyana who participated in this democratic process for being part of this very important exercise and a good day that we had in the voting process. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you more at this media center as we continue to engage over the coming days. Thank you very much, and have a pleasant evening.